Hi, I'm Charles Miranda from News Corp Australia, and today I'm here with Manny Carruthers, former New South Wales police officer and the man behind the highly successful podcast series The Missing.
Hey Charles, thanks for having me on, mate.
What a great success The Missing has been. I mean, it is just ridiculously popular. Why is it so ridiculously popular, do you think?
Oh, look, I think it's an important issue that people can relate to. You know, when you talk about missing people, you just have to imagine for a moment someone close to you disappearing and not knowing what happened to them, and it can get pretty frightening. So I think people can relate to it.
A lot of listeners out there have a lot of questions. The first one we have is from Mark, and nice easy one to start with. He's curious about how you choose the cases to cover, and he rightly points out there's obviously thousands of cases to choose, but you zero in on a certain few.
Yeah, look, there are 2,600 long-term missing person cases, so that means someone who's been, missing for 3 or more months. When I look at cases, I tend to look at cases that I believe have suspicion around the disappearance of the person, because people go missing for 4 main reasons. 1, self-harm; 2, accident or misadventure; 3, they might want to start a new life somewhere else under another identity, but that's really difficult with the digital footprint that we have today; and 4, foul play. Now, I believe that more than 50% of long-term missing people are victims of foul play. So that means someone has gotten away with murder. So I look at cases that are suspicious, because I think, if there's someone out there who's a killer, they need to be brought to justice. I also like to look at cases involving children, because I think offences against kids are the worst of the worst. And there's also 700 unidentified bodies and remains around Australia. So that's 700 people who no one knows their identity, so their identity's missing, and that's really sad. It means that they've passed away and no one's come forward to claim them.
Why can't more be done? I mean, we've got advances in DNA technology and forensics, obviously, for some of these older cases. We do know that most state police forces have a cold case unit. Why isn't more being done for these cases? You mentioned 2,600 odd year on year.
Yeah, look, I think what happens is it's crucial the first 24 hours in any missing persons case or a murder or any serious case, because you have to maintain the integrity of potential crime scenes, because people will walk through, contaminate, or if it's outside a storm, it washes evidence away. So the clock ticks as soon as someone's reported missing. So it's really important, and to get witnesses while things are still fresh in their eyes. But once police pursue leads and then there's no more leads, the cases tend to go cold.
Right.
And that's why I guess our catch cry is someone somewhere knows something, because we want. I believe that there are people out there that have information, and those people need to come forward and contact the police, so they can reinvigorate an investigation, kickstart it, so to speak, and get to the bottom of it.
Now, you mentioned timing, and we have a question here from one of your listeners, Norm, and it's a good question actually. He says, is it true that when someone goes missing, you have to wait 24 to 48 hours? And we see that on American cop shows all the time. Is it actually true here?
No, mate, massive misconception. The thing is, if you have fears for the safety or welfare of any person who can't be located, go straight to the police station and report it.
One of your listeners, Mark, here asks makes the point and asks a question. It must be horrible for families of the missing people not knowing if holding out hope is futile and being afraid of finding out the truth of the disappearance. In your experience, is there a way for them to cope with that sort of situation?
Mate, there's no manual to tell you how to cope if someone goes missing. It's an emotional roller coaster, and people they react differently. I mean, some people fall in a heap, others become angry, and they lash out at the world and people around them. It's just, as I said, when you don't know whether your loved one is alive or dead, whether they're being hurt, whether they're safe, whether they're cold, whether they have shelter, it's a horrible feeling. So I describe it as families of missing people. It's like you're treading water, and trying to keep your head above the surface. You're in a holding pattern. you don't know what's happened. And probably the best example I can give is the parents of Daniel Morecambe, the young Queensland boy who disappeared and subsequently was found to have been murdered by Peter Cohen. I was living in Brisbane at the time, working as a reporter, and I interviewed Bruce and Denise Morecambe, Daniel's parents, shortly after. And from the very beginning, just weeks after Daniel disappeared, Bruce had concluded in his own mind that Daniel was not coming home, that he was deceased. And his focus was on finding the person or persons who took Daniel. Denise held out hope that Daniel was still alive. And one of the last times I interviewed him was 3 or 4 years later, and Bruce was still steadfast in his belief, but Denise still held out hope. And I recall her saying to me, you hear about kids being kidnapped and they find them 10, 20 years later. So here were the parents of a child that went missing, and their way to deal with it was completely polar opposite.
And that goes to the heart of the point you made earlier. I mean, how people cope differently, but the strain that must place, particularly on that family, when one figure believes this and the other figure believes that. I mean, how do they reconcile that?
Look, I don't know. As I said, I can't think of anything worse than having a loved one who's missing. Because if you have a loved one, and you lose them, they die, at least you know what's happened. At least you can follow social norms and have a funeral. You can say your goodbyes, and you have a place to go and visit. But when they're missing, you don't know what's happened. And there are cases of people, they don't change their phone numbers, right? They won't leave the house they live in. Because even though all the evidence will point to the fact that their loved one is no longer alive, there's still that little glimmer of hope. Wow. And they stay, fixed where they have been all their life.
Wow, yeah. Now, you mentioned the Morecambes. Has there been a case, either through your career, your various careers, and the podcast series now, that's struck a chord with you particularly? Was there one that really is gnawing at you more than the others?
Yeah, look, every case I do, I mean, I guess affects me, and when I do a case, I guess I don't put up walls. People say, how do you cope? Do you put up, do you try and separate yourself from the case? And I don't, because I want to feel the heartbreak and the anguish of the family, because I use that as motivation to drive me to do what I can to try and get answers for them. So look, every case is important to me. I mean, there's the Gordana Kateski case, because I've become close to the mother and the sister, which is still unsolved. And there's also a case of Lynette Melbourne, who disappeared from Penrith Plaza back in, I think it was the 5th of January 1972. Now, she was a twin, and I got to meet her twin sister Liana through an ex-detective I work with. He befriended Liana and her husband, and they asked him to look into the case. And this ex-detective has found a person of interest, numerous witnesses, and he's passed that on to the homicide squad, so we're waiting to come back. But there was also a police connection here with the family, because Liana's first husband was an officer who was murdered at Crescent Head. There were 2 officers, Robert Addison and Robert Spears, that were murdered, if you remember.
I remember that very
well. And Liana, one of those gentlemen was Liana's husband. So she's part of the police family. So I feel, a special connection to the family, because, as I said, Lynette is still missing. The mother passed away 2 years ago. The father, Terry, is still alive. I think he's 86 now, and he wants nothing more than to find out what happened to his little girl before he dies.
Now, you mentioned Gordana as well, and there's been, I guess, various supposed breaks in that case over the years, and including in the podcast, someone's come forward with some information specifically on that case. Do we know any more? Someone has come forward with some piece of evidence, and I think you confirmed with the police that is being pursued. What's the latest on that?
Well, we were really fortunate with the Gordana Kateski case, because, I mean, the whole purpose of doing the podcast is to engage with listeners, to put a call to action, to appeal that if they know something, to contact the authorities, that the authorities can, do their job. And we featured Gordana's story in the last season, and a lady called Bianca Ball contacted me, and she told me that she had been stalked by two men who were of similar appearance to the men described by witnesses at Tukordana, and they drove a similar vehicle. So she features in episode 1 of the new season. A listener came forward and told police of a harrowing ordeal she had back in 1980 when she was waiting to catch a bus at Gateshead up in Newcastle. She was abducted by a man at knife point. She gave a statement to police, and just a few weeks ago a man was arrested and charged with that abduction almost 44 years ago.
Do you believe that there are actually more bodies, more victims of Ivan Milat out there? And of course, Ivan Milat is deceased. We may never know, but are there others out there, do you think?
Oh, look, I'm sure. And I think, the police had investigated, Milat in particular, Clive Small, who headed the strike force. No doubt, I don't believe that Ivan Milat woke up in the early 90s one morning and said, I'm going to go out and kill backpackers. He'd been doing this for some time, and he would have continued to do it if he hadn't been caught. So, look, I think that there are other secrets there in the forest, and I think that, in the future, I think, more bodies will be uncovered.
And of course, famously, I think it was Peter Letcher in 1987, whose body was found in Jenolan State Forest, partially buried. And again, that case involved him having been stabbed and shot, which was the modus operandi of Ivan Milat. And police managed to prove that Ivan Milat was in that Jenolan, which is west of Sydney, the Jenolan area at the time. Why do you think they couldn't actually declare Peter, whose body was found, and they had all that evidence, why couldn't they ever declare him as another victim of Ivan Milat, more than just a suspicion that it is Ivan Milat?
Well, look, I think having modus operandi, like a way he's killed them or whatever, obviously isn't enough. You need physical evidence. Like with Milat and the 7 backpackers, you recall they raided the house he was living in with his sister Shirley, and they found property that they were able to identify as belonging to the backpackers. So yes. I think that's all it lacked. I think there's a lot of cases, but I think also we need to be careful, because I think the mistake that's made is that people will assume that everyone young person hitchhiker that's gone missing is a victim of Ivan Milat. And
it's convenient, isn't it?
Yeah, but worryingly, it's not. There are others out there, probably like Ivan Milat, other serial killers that haven't been caught.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, he was writing to us for a fair while. I got a box full of his old letters in here, and we asked that question. You've been accused of 14 other murders out there. What say you? The response was never straight. And I guess that's what police were up against when they formally interviewed him. It would just be waffle. He didn't want to say either way. He took it to the grave. He took it
and look, and the reason for that, we're talking about a sociopath, psychopath, a narcissist, right? Now he gets caught. He's in jail. Now he's told when to wake up, when to eat. I mean, when to use the bathroom, when to shower. He has no power. The only power Milat had was the knowledge of these other victims. All right, and for someone like him, a narcissist, that's all he could hold on to. So, he was an evil person, and even in death, he continues to torment, victims and their families.
Absolutely. Question from Tam. I'd like to ask why there's no legal action was ever taken after the inquiry into the disappearance of Rachel Antonio. I'm not familiar with this case.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about it?
Rachel was a 16-year-old girl who went missing on Anzac Day 1998 from Bowen, which is up near Townsville in North Queensland. She was only 16. She had a 25-year-old boyfriend called Robert Hitch. Now, he was charged with her manslaughter in 1999, but he was acquitted at retrial. There was a coronial inquest in front of, I think the coroner was called David O'Connell. Now, he recommended perjury charges against Hitch, but the prosecution never proceeded because they said there was no evidence. So she's still a missing person, presumed deceased.
That's very similar to the, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know Cheryl Grimmer, the toddler. I mean, horrific disappearance. I mean, it always seems to be more weighted when it's a child of, particularly of that age. Now, in 2019. Somebody was brought before the court, someone was going to be charged, but the case fell over, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the case fell over because at the time he was interviewed, so his police record of interview back then, from 1971, he was 17 years old and he had no parent or guardian with him.
Exactly, yeah.
And so
1970 it was, yeah.
But 1970.
Yeah.
But in those days, you didn't need to have a parent or guardian.
No.
So fast forward to 2019 when he was charged. Why did that case fall over?
Well, look, one of the detectives who charged that man, I mean, one was Damien Loon, that you and I both know, and the other one is a gentleman that I know, because Cheryl disappeared from Ferry Meadow Beach in Wollongong, and I'm born and bred in Wollongong. So I know the case, and I actually just caught up last week for a coffee with that detective. So what had happened is they were doing a review. They were both on light duties, Damien and this other detective, and they went through the old brief and they found the confession. Now, the confession had been made 18 months after Cheryl disappeared by a juvenile at the time, and he admitted to abducting her and killing her. But back then, for some reason, police didn't charge him. Now, whether they thought he was making it up, I don't know. So they went and charged him. But at a pre-trial hearing, the defence argued that he was, a juvenile and there was no adult lawyer or a guardian there. And they argued that a law that came in after, because back then you could interview a juvenile without the presence of an adult.
And he wasn't he was 17, so he was on the verge of being an adult.
18. Yeah,
right.
4 months short. But they argued that retrospectively, the law should have been applied back then. And the court accepted that, and they made the confession inadmissible, and so the DPP then withdrew the charge. Now, this shattered both police and the detective who is a mate of mine. I mean, he was so disillusioned, he left the police force.
Another case I'm not familiar with, but this question is from a listener, Rick. Really interested in the cold case of Eloise Waldridge. Anything new in that? Tell us a bit about this case.
Yeah, it's a Victorian case. So she was 8 years old, and I think it was 1976. She was went missing from her bedroom at her home in Beaumaris, which is in Victoria. Her 4-year-old brother told police that some robbers came in and took her, but he didn't say anything because he was afraid they might take him as well. Police obviously did a canvass of the area, and witnesses came forward. They said they'd seen a couple of suspicious cars. One witness said they heard a child cry and a car door slam, and another witness said they saw a young man, tall man, jump a fence into the yard of the house. Now, those leads were pursued, but nothing ever came of it. But she's still missing, and no one's ever been held accountable, and I don't believe any new information has come forward. So, again, we need people that know something to pick up the phone.
No, we touched on it briefly with Ivan Milat taking secrets to the grave. I mean, with these people who were charged, who may or may not have had involvement with her disappearance, I mean, what's the likelihood that they will come forward, that someone will come forward who's inherently involved in the case to say, I know this?
Look, I don't think it's likely. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, who's going to put up their hand to hit the dock and go to jail? So you need people that maybe are on the fringes, that know something, maybe that they've got a twisted sense of loyalty. Could be a partner or something,
So deathbed confessions, that's a Hollywood thing that doesn't happen.
I don't. Well, look, it may happen, but I mean, by then it's too late. You know what I mean? And yeah. So, and you don't know. I mean, if people are dying of a really let's say cancer or something, when they're pumped up with drugs. So is it the drugs talking, or is it their conscience talking? You don't know.
Question from Christopher here. Via television programming, cop shows, etc., the public perception is rightly that the first 24 hours in the missing persons case are vital, and you were talking about that obviously at the top of the show. Where and how do you begin to reinvestigate a decades-old case? I guess what he's asking is, do you need that tip, or is there something else? Is it trawling over old evidence? No,
I think what I do, to prepare, I'll read as much as I can about it, so news stories, etc. I'll then go online, and if there's been a coronial inquest, I'll read the coronial inquest, try and get my hands on witness statements, etc. And then I talk to family. Try and track down the last people that saw that person alive. A lot of the cases are cold, so the police have left their ex-coppers, so I'll talk to ex-police, just try and gather as much information about the case. And then, I guess normally something comes at you when you're talking to people.
Yes.
People will give up something. Like there was a case of dead baby sent in the mail in 1965 from Melbourne to Darwin. Now, I tracked down the only cop alive, Denver Marchant, up in Harvey Bay.
Must have been in his 80s or 90s.
He was 83, yeah. Now, he'd been interviewed about the case before. And when I was interviewing him, because what I do is I'll speak to everyone before I go to the interview over the phone to get a background and know what I'm going to ask them. And Denver had never mentioned to me that he had a suspicion of who the package was meant for.
Right.
But as we were nearing the end of the interview, he said, "Oh, look, I've got to share something with you." And he never shared it before. So it came out of left field, but he told me the name of who he thought the package was meant for. So I went with that, and the story came out, and the gentleman that Denver had nominated, his daughter rang me and said, "I think the dead baby could be my older brother." So police had applied a couple of years ago to exhume the baby's body to get DNA, and the coroner had refused the request. So when the potential relative came forward, I got in contact with Northern Territory Police, and they interviewed her, took her DNA, made another application to the coroner, and this time it was granted. And on the 22nd of November, the baby's body was exhumed. So we now have DNA, we have a starting point. So, yeah, so what I try and do is when you do is I don't want to go over just what we've already read as in there.
Yes.
It's about progressing the investigation and about something new coming up that will allow police to follow a lead and hopefully crack the case.
Why did the coroner turn it down in the first instance?
Well, because it's a big deal to exhume, a deceased, and I just think he wanted more evidence. It was a newborn baby. It was 1965. He probably wanted more information about the likelihood of getting DNA. But we know, 400,000-year-old bones, and they were in Spain. Neanderthals, they extracted DNA.
Yes.
So that's all it was. But when they went to the coroner and say, "Hey, listen, we've got a potential relative," well, that sort of changes everything.
Second half of Christopher's question, and I think you've answered it. Are the original investigators you speak to helpful, or are they reluctant to have you re-examining their work? A lot of them are friends of yours that you will drink beer or coffee with anyway, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think it depends on the case. If it's a cold case, police know the value of media. All right, and using the media to try and get people to come forward with information. So I think they're more willing to assist with cold cases. Now, if a case is current, and there could be strategies in place, could be an active investigation, and that they're obviously less likely to want to participate because they're doing something, right? And I understand that. But I think, look, most police, I don't think they're insecure and they think I'm going to go over their work. I'm not going over their work. All I'm doing is shining a spotlight on a case and then making an appeal, trying to engage with the listeners by trying to make the person that's missing like a real person, someone that they can relate to, not just someone that's a photo on a poster. That's why it's important to talk to family in that, because I want the listener to be able to feel a little bit of the heartbreak and anguish that they're going through, because that may be the trigger point to make them pick up that phone and call police.
And I think it's been shown that there is no harm from reopening some of these cases. No. You've shown that in the podcast series. Yeah. Obviously, famously, we had the Lynette Dawson and the fantastic podcast series Teacher's Pet.
Yeah.
Showed that, yes, raking over those old coals, the police aren't going to be offended. It might actually throw something up.
Yeah, and police do it all the time, and they have cold case squads, and their job is to look at old cases with a critical eye and go over the what was done back then. So go over and see what police did and didn't do. And and the big thing is there's been so many advancements in technology. DNA is the main one, but all sorts of technology, so it's very important that these cases are reviewed by police. And as I said, my role that I see is just to keep a spotlight on them so that we don't forget about them.
Greg says, "Hi Manny, I'm a retired member, presumably of the police force, and I saw your post. I think I know who he's talking about here, but I'd be interested to see if you know. I was wondering if that girl that went missing in Bathurst after going to a bar was ever solved 10 or 15 years ago.
Janine Vaughan.
2001. A very big case.
Yeah.
They've had so many cold case reopenings off that case, but still I don't believe there's been a break, has there?
No, mate, there hasn't. I mean, last seen getting into a red car. My understanding was that there were 3 persons of interest, but no one's ever been brought to justice, and she remains a missing person. And you're right, it's received a hell of a lot of media, a hell of a lot of police resources and attention, but it still remains unsolved.
This question from Scott McCarthy, a former New South Wales police officer, and he has a question for you from when he was in the force. And he says, "Hi Manny, as a very junior constable, I was involved in the search for a missing person in Bungendore in New South Wales in 1991. I think that's just outside of Canberra. Her name was Diane Pinacchio, and some weeks later her body was found in a forest. I believe from memory shot and covered in branches. I guarded the crime scene that night until detectives and forensics could come and process the crime scene the next day," which would have been absolutely harrowing and fascinating. That's my commentary. The rest of his question: "I have heard many theories, but one that stands out was, did Ivan Milat murder her?" And of course, we've already spoken about Ivan Milat's cases and the number of cases that have been linked to the serial killer. I mean, is it plausible that this case could have been linked to her as well?
Look, he was linked to it. I know that Clive Small said that he could have been responsible, and the reasons for it: she was a young mum, I think she was 29 or 30, and had been out, and I think she accepted a ride home. So she was a hitchhiker, which was what Milat always looked for. Her body was found, as you said, a couple of months after, and it was about 100 kilometres, I think, from Belangolo State Forest. And I think at the time police were able to determine that he was working around Goulburn. But it had a similar.
It's unfortunate that Milat worked on the highways, wasn't it? He
was a highway, moved around too much. Yeah.
Ground sealer, so he was everywhere. He was absolutely everywhere.
But the MO was similar. So Diane's body was found face down near a tree, and she was covered with branches and leaves, and so were the backpackers. They were found face down, covered with branches and leaves. And Milat either shot or stabbed his victims to death. When he stabbed them, police believe he severed the spinal cord to make them incapacitated. And Diane, I believe, was stabbed to death. She was stabbed in the back. Right. So the MO fits, and I know that Clive Small, had thrown her case up as one that Milat was probably good for. But I've always believed that if Milat did not act alone, that the other person was a woman. And the reason I believe that is because I think hitchhikers would be reluctant to get into a car with 2 rough-looking blokes. But if it was an elderly couple, and I remember back in I think it was the early 1990s, I was setting up a story. I was working in television with the Milats. And I met his brothers and his sister Shirley at a small flat in Brighton, Les Sands. And Shirley was very unsettling. There was something really off about her. And we know that they were living together at the time he was arrested. And there was also rumours that they were involved in a sexual relationship, an incestuous relationship. So yeah, I've always believed that if he had a co-conspirator, it was a woman.
Right. Interesting. Yet, obviously, no charges were ever laid or pursued.
No.
Look, we are talking about Ivan Milat again, but obviously that's the enigma that case has been. One thing I'm curious about, and we have touched about it as well in discussing other cases, but in Milat's case, there was Paul Onions, who obviously was taken hostage by Ivan Milat. He escaped famously. He got to the Barrel police station. He made all these descriptions of who it was and what it was and the gun and the ropes that he saw and all the rest of it. And the police at the time gave him $10 and said, go report it to the British Embassy or the High Commission in Sydney. With Gordana's case, we know that someone at the time had called Crime Stoppers with some information related to a relative. Ironically, they were attached to the judiciary as well, so they had some gravitas. That clue in that day was also missed. How often is it that there are clues? Like Paul Onion's case was never brought up, even though he had this crucial piece of evidence with Ivan Milat's case. It wasn't brought up for years and years later. How often does that happen, that there are these little tantalising clues that could actually solve a mystery which are missed at that time.
Oh,
And
look,
why? And why? Are they
look,
missed?
I think if it happened in the past, I think, well, I'm sure police have learned from it. Like the Onions thing, it was actually a detective who discovered that report. Was I believe a gentleman called Paul Gordon that I work with at Darlinghurst. Yeah, I mean, look, that was something that fell through the cracks, but I think, there's been a lot of reviews, etc. So I hope that doesn't happen anymore.
It was at that time as well. Obviously now we have AI.
Yeah.
Dare we introduce AI into the cases? But AI can serve as a tool to obviously catalogue pieces of evidence that come in and perhaps cross-check and cross-match without a human doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
and we talked about AI in the past. I mean, can you see a time where AI becomes more of a tool for police rather than something that we all fear at the moment?
Oh, look, I think the way that technology is evolving, I think if it can be beneficial, if police can look at it and think, look, this can benefit us in some way in tackling crime, then most definitely. I mean, I don't see an issue with it. If it's going to help keep crime down and solve crime, most definitely. Look, I guess the thing is that humans make errors, and police are humans. And sometimes they make mistakes, and the Paul Onions one was obviously a blatant one. Obviously whoever took the report, I guess, dismissed it as no big deal. Maybe they thought he was making it up. I don't know, but yeah, look, I would hope that that sort of thing doesn't happen anymore.
AI will obviously never replace, though, the detective that will go through an old report and just see something that a computer won't necessarily analyse or understand, that just a little nuance that just doesn't quite make sense, and pursue that case. I mean, your former colleagues will never be replaced, will they?
Well, look, I don't think so, because I mean the big thing is the best type of policing is good old-fashioned walking the beat, knocking on doors, talking to people. I mean, AI can't do that. You can't be canvassing areas, knocking on the door and talking to people and asking questions. So yeah, I can't see a time where AI is going to replace policing, but certainly if it can help by collating statistics and other information, because the most important thing is, and that's where technology is great now, because DNA is evolving so quickly, but so is technology for police. Like New South Wales Police have a geo-targeting SMS thing that goes out to an area, to mobile phones where someone goes missing, with a description.
Like a triangulation of it?
Yeah. So, if you're in that area and someone's gone missing, you'll get a text message with a description of the person and when they went missing and last place they were seen. So what technology does, it makes things immediate. And you can keep updating and doing things like that. So and it allows, I guess, police to engage with the public, like what we try and do with the podcast, to engage with the public, to seek out information. So that immediacy for technology is very important.
Manny Carruthers, thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the next podcast dropping. But Series 3 of The Missing Australia is out now, and hopefully you and I can have another chat and talk about some of these fascinating cases.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.